Hi guys, this is Hannah from Hannah B Flute. It's been quite a long time since I made a YouTube video, but I thought I would get back into it at least for this week, see how it goes, see if I want to stick to it or not. But if you want to catch up with my content more regularly, you can check out my blog at hannahbflute.com/blog. I'll link that down in the description to make it easy to click over there. But yeah, so that's probably the best place to find me, at least while I still figure out all this YouTube stuff out. And otherwise, you can subscribe, see if I decide to keep making YouTube videos. All right, so as I get into the content, I'm going to talk about some tips on flying with a flute. So flying with any musical instrument is, of course, kind of complicated. You have to think about a lot. The flute is luckily an easier instrument to fly with than like a cello or even a violin, because the flute is so small. So you can see my flute bag here. I mean, it's, easy enough to put in a carry-on or take on separately, which leads into my first tip, is to pack it in a bigger bag. So if you have like a backpack, got one to show you right here. This is a pretty big backpack. The Flute or scooter bag, it's the brown bag right here, fits in it nicely. This backpack even holds an alto flute, which is really nice. It does kind of stretch out a little bit, so I don't know how I'd use that. I've never flown with an alto, but for flying with like a flute, it's nice. And by packing it in another bag, you can save space, so you don't have to dedicate your flute bag to one of your personal or carry-on items. But if you do this, make sure you pack the flute last so that it's easy to remove at security in case they need to go through it, in case they need to ask you questions about it, just so you don't have to like ruin everything, all the work you did to practice. On the flip side, you can add other things to the case. So again, using flute or scooter as an example, I have both my flute and piccolo in here, and there's still a decent amount of space. So, there's like space for accessories and stuff. If you're traveling, you might want to put your keys there, or your phone, or even like socks or something, just to use as much of the space as possible. When I was flying with a flute, I had to put my big backpack, which was the backpack you just saw, up in the overhead bins, but I wanted to make sure I could access like my phone and snacks and I think my medicine, maybe, depending on when the flight was. So I moved those things into the empty space in the flute or scooter bag, because that did fit under my seat. So I was able to access it that way. All right, so the next one is for long before your flight. As soon as you buy an instrument, keep that receipt in a safe place. It could be in your desk, it could be in your case, it could be on your phone as like a digital copy. You could scan it. But that's especially important if you're traveling internationally. But even traveling domestically, you want to prove that the instrument is yours and that you aren't stealing it, trying to smuggle it. People do bad things, and we want to prove that we aren't those people doing those bad things. So by keeping your receipt, you can prove, hey, this instrument is mine. I spent all the money on it. Don't take it from me. And that's also important if you're flying with a wooden piccolo. There's the CITES or CITES treaty that controls certain woods and restricts those. So especially if you don't just have like a grenadilla head joint and grenadilla body, but even if you do, I don't know the restrictions on that exactly, but if you have a more exotic wood, like an ivory kind of thing, you want to prove that it's yours and that you're not smuggling it or doing anything illegal with it. All right, so the next tip is to get to the airport early. And of course, this is a tip for every traveler, but more so when you're traveling with a flute, because you want to have as much time to get through security as stress-free as possible. Because if you do have to rush through security, like what if they decide to check your stuff in detail, not just because you're a flute player, but just because you're that one traveler that got picked. You want to have time for them to go through all your stuff, and so that you can still reach your gate and reach your destination, get on that flight, and the whole 9 yards. Getting to the airport early also means you'll have time to find the gate and find a spot for yourself to sit with your stuff. You can also talk to the gate agent. I've never done this, but supposedly it can help you maybe board a little earlier if you tell them your situation nicely. You know, don't be that rude person that just demands to board first. But, you know, being nice is also just a good thing, even if nothing comes of it. Next, bring your backup flute instead of your really good flute. This is more so if you're traveling for vacation or for fun, and you just want to bring your flute to practice occasionally. If you're traveling, you know, for an audition, I know a lot of musicians are starting to do that with everything opening up. You want to have the best gear you can so that you can perform the best. And if you're also going for a performance, you know, of course you want the best instrument you have. So this doesn't apply to that, but leisure travel, consider bringing your backup flute. Then in case anything happens to it, you aren't having to worry about your professional flute. Which, speaking of that, I did not mention this in the blog post, but I will mention it here, is consider getting insurance if you haven't already. Well, actually, no, get insurance if you haven't already for your flute, ideally from a musical instrument company like Anderson or Clarion, because they will help protect your instrument in case something happens. I've never had to use my insurance, knock on wood, but it's nice knowing that it's there in case something goes wrong. So if you do have to bring, whether you bring your backup flute or your regular flute, you know, insure both, and then you're good when you're traveling. Once you get to your gate, try to board as early as you can. You could do this at the gate or try to think about things before, like when you're booking your flight. So if you're on an airline that has first class, maybe it's worth paying for the upgrade. 1, for the extra space, 2, for the fact that they board first. The earlier you board, the more overhead space there's going to be. So there's a greater chance that you'll either get to pack your flute up there or whatever other carry-on bag you brought. Another option is to use like early bird check-in on Southwest. It's a very airline specific thing, but I did that when I went to the National Flute Association convention in Orlando in 2018. I flew on Southwest, and when I booked my flight, I paid the like $30 for early bird check-in, and I was one of the first 30 people to board. So I got to sit in one of the first 10 rows, got an aisle seat, which is what I wanted, was able to put my stuff in the overhead bin. Super nice, especially because the flight back was full, plus baby, plus jump seat. So someone who I guess had been a flight attendant but wasn't working the flight sat in a flight attendant jump seat. That's how full the flight was. So had I been one of the last to board, my flute may not have fit, or my backpack with all of my other necessities may not have fit. So another option is to select a window seat, because sometimes they'll board first. I know when I've traveled with my family, even though my mom checked us all in at the same time, the person who was assigned an aisle seat had a later boarding group than the rest. We would all board together anyway, but it's just, something to consider if you aren't someone who likes the aisle seat. If you like the window, it might help you board earlier. Another thing that can help save space, save weight, isn't necessarily about the flute, but it's to use an iPad for all of your sheet music. So I have my iPad here. I use Fourscore, which is an app that I did a video about last year when I was making all these videos. And I can Here's like a Mozart symphony fiddle, even. It won't focus, but I can scroll through it, and I have a ton of music on here at this point because I've been using an iPad for sheet music for almost 2 years. So I'm sure the paper copies of that would be massive, and it's nice being able to access all of that stuff. So that way you can usually put your iPad in your carry-on, which is nice, and you'll have everything you need, so you don't have to worry about losing it if you put it in your checked baggage. Just of course remember to bring your charger and charge it when you get to your hotel or whenever. And when you have an iPad, you have something to keep you busy on the airplane. So, and then my last tip applies to flying, driving, trains, buses, any sort of traveling, and that is to keep it close. So especially if you're traveling alone, you don't want to set it down anywhere. Even if you're traveling with someone else, you want to make sure they're going to watch it and they aren't going to just walk off. Because even if they only walk away a few feet, someone could easily grab it, and then your instrument is gone, which would really, really suck. So, when you're in the airport, keep it on you. The flute isn't that big, so it's not that big of a pain to walk around with it. It can be annoying to have one extra thing to carry, but, at least it's not a double bass or any other big instrument like a tuba. So, if you're traveling, take it to like the restroom with you. Take it if you go to get a snack. Same thing with driving. Unless you're driving with someone and they're willing to stay in the car, don't leave your flute in the car. When I was in grad school driving between Kansas City and Omaha, it's not an awful drive, but it's 3 hours, and for a while it was 4.5 because the interstate got shut down because of flooding. And so that meant a lot of the time I would have to stop and use the restroom. And I would take my backpack with my flute in it inside. And I'm sure I looked weird to other people, but it was worth it knowing that my flute was right there and knowing that someone wasn't going to like carjack me and take the flute out and, me not have it. So that's just something to think about. Applies to traveling, applies to flying, and any other form of transportation. So those are my tips on how to fly with flute. I hope you liked this video. If you did, and if you want to see more videos from me, like and subscribe and comment below. Comment below with any ideas on what you'd like to see for videos, music, sheet music arrangements, because I also do that. And so I might end up posting audio for those here on YouTube as well. But that is it for today. Thank you all for watching.